Today's episode of the People Nova podcast, we're chatting with a business strategist focused on serving Black career professionals. We discuss DIY employment strategies for founders building amazing cultures. We also share gems for candidates evaluating their professional priorities. Bonus, we share a quick tip for gap analysis: how to tell if the company lives its espoused values. Double bonus, we were inspired by our guest's favorite art to help us maintain integrity. Let's jump into the conversation with Charlene Chin. Welcome, everyone, to the People Nova podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill, and today I'm here with a very amazing woman, my good colleague and soon-to-be good friend, Charlene. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Charlene, do a favor for us and introduce yourself for our audience.
So like what you said, my name is Charlene Chin. I have been in the HR recruiting space for the last 5+ years, working primarily with staffing and recruiting. I'm currently in the talent management space for a law firm in the Boston area, focused on all things talent management, HR, and recruiting, working with professional staff and attorneys. I recently started my own career consulting business, primarily focused on providing career consulting services to professionals of color, specifically African American professionals of color in corporate spaces. As someone who has also been in this industry myself, I thought it was important, and I felt this need to provide a resource for those who are also navigating in this space. So it's not just focused on, the traditional career focus of, your resume and your cover letter, that sort of thing. It's also talking about just how to navigate in this space as an African American professional. How to have certain conversations, how to broach the topic of, wanting to advance, wanting to be promoted for certain roles, how to just network within your internal network and external network, and then just also managing overall professional and personal growth.
Great. Oh, that's fantastic. I can't wait for our listeners to click on your link and go check you out and get your services. So our podcast is about the human side of business. And in this age of quarantine, we realize the tremendous impact that quarantine and adjusting our work environment to a virtual. Some jobs can go virtual and some cannot. I know I've had a lot of friends that have been furloughed while we wait for different countries to open back up and what that looks like. And we're now in the time of phased reopening, whatever that means. But I wanted to focus a little bit on, it's not so much we do business to business, it's really we do business with other humans. And so it is about the human to human side of our workplace. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that perspective.
So there's definitely a humanistic side when it comes to this line of work. I think HR is a field that is very obviously focused on the humans. And so with that, it requires us to think differently in terms of how we work. It requires us to move differently because we're dealing with not just the technical side of the work, but we're also dealing with people. I hope I'm answering the question, if that makes sense.
It does.
So I think it's a very interesting piece of an organization's function. Because with the people, you're looking at the talent. With the people, you're just looking at the overall culture. The people drive a lot within a business. If you don't have people, you don't have a company. So I think with HR, it's a very unique piece of an organization that requires a lot of intentionality. It does at times have a negative connotation just because I think a lot of people hear HR and assume that they're automatically just for the company. Yeah. And to be perfectly honest, there is a bottom line that yes, they need to make sure that they do their part for the sake of the organization. But I think now, especially with the times that we're in, I think companies are going to have to shift that narrative a little bit more and make sure that they put the people first, because the people will drive how a company excels moving forward, especially now. The people will drive what the benchmark is in terms of talent, you know, how they're being perceived in the market. So I think all of that is important.
I want to, there's two things I want to follow up that I heard, and thank you for going there. One of the things that you said was people often think HR has a negative connotation and they're about the business, right? And I mean, I've been a practitioner for 20 years in this field, and I have felt that, right? It's not the HR department, it's the complaint department.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, it's not the best part of my job. It's not the part of my job I love, but I have to deal with it, right? And when you know, in delicate conversations, I make sure to say, you know, HR sits on the fence, right? There are times where we're going to advocate for the bottom line of the company, and there are times where we're going to advocate for the best interest of the employee. And I hate to give a lawyer answer because we're both lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
but it depends, right?
Right.
Like
It does.
very situational, and it's hard for employees to hear that. It is also hard for my boss, right? Like the CEO of the company to hear that, because he has a focus on, he or she has a focus on the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. No, it is true. And like you said, it is a very delicate, outside of people saying it depends, that's a common phrase. It's also case by case. It's also like another common phrase that you'll hear. And like you said, a lot of employees don't want to hear that or don't understand that. You know, they feel like every scenario has to have the same result. Um, and it's not always like that. So I know for me, I've had to learn over the years how to navigate those conversations. I've been in the presence of them. And thankfully for the managers that I've had in previous roles, they've allowed me to have that opportunity to see what that interaction is like. And then when it was my turn to have the conversation, I found myself really thinking back to when I was sitting in the room and kind of seeing what that interaction was like. Now I have to be the one to voice, you know, an outcome of some kind or have a conversation with an employee that may not be as comfortable as they would like. So just learning how to tote that line between giving the results, but also understanding that these are people. And so for me, I know I've found myself emotionally attached at times. And I've had managers who've had to tell me, like, I get it, but you gotta separate yourself just a little bit. So I feel like I've gotten better about how to come with a level of comfort, but within that comfort, provide the information that they hear and recognize that, yes, this is not something that ideally you want to hear, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you the exact information that you needed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always interesting when we get into these HR-esque type scenarios. Yeah.
And oftentimes a lot of, so I'm in the startup ecosystem, right? And typically HR is like the last thing they hire, or they don't hire until there's a problem, or they get, you know, critical mass. And what I have seen as a trend, at least in the Boston ecosystem, is about 80 to 100 employees. You know, at that point, they start saying, oh, we need someone to look at the total like organization culture and have a HR lead person to like encompass everything. Sometimes they'll have a headhunter, like an in-house headhunter very early. I think that's typically the early person that I see hired to put, frankly, butts in seats to help the startup scale and rapidly grow and everything. But like the people dynamics and the culture and the strategy piece of it is missing, is almost an afterthought, I feel, until they get a little bit bigger. And so I've been working with clients who are what I consider micro and small, and some first-time founders and some very, very early stage, you know, seed stage organizations. Do you have any recommendations for these organizations that are really I'll call it what it is, trying to DIY the employment strategy. And there's tons of resources and blogs and everything out there. So not to give too many distractions, but what would you recommend someone who's trying to be that first time leader and
So for
make
me,
these?
I would definitely say that's something that has to be outsourced. Even before you outsource it, I think it's important for whoever is in the decision making room for what strategy is going to look like from a talent perspective, making sure that that strategy is crystal clear. Because I'm sure for you, if someone's reaching out, retaining their services, and then you come in and say, okay, so what are we dealing with? What are you guys looking to do? And everyone's looking around the room like, I don't know. So I think it's important to have clarity on what you would like your organization to look like. Have that in mind, and then outsource someone who could come in and kind of shape it up in a way where it can be packaged and properly given to the employees as they come in. I think trying to do a DIY setup when it comes to HR and talent is very, that's not a good look, to put it plainly.
Dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
it's
think
dangerous.
it's a very risky thing because you're someone who is looking at the betterment of the company, trying to determine how to handle people. And if you're not already if you're not already in that mindset, or you're not already someone who's trained in that area, yeah, there's a ton of resources about, how to have the right culture, how to, coach your employees, how to,
Why it's so important.
right,
Like,
the
okay,
why
like I
behind,
get it, but
right.
how do I do it?
But then that's the thing, how. And I think the
Yeah.
how starts with, of course, having a strategy in place, but then having someone who is really trained and capable of seeing it from the outside looking in, because everyone's mindset internally is going to be for the betterment of the company and the bottom line and blah blah blah. But I think if you have someone who's external who can come in and see where the organization is currently, where they're looking to go, and kind of reverse engineer back in terms of, we're trying to get here, we're here, so let's figure out what are the pieces in between. So definitely, if they can, I would definitely outsource that to someone who is a lot more trained and better equipped to really have a targeted focus on what talent and that strategy looks like for the organization.
Yeah. And I like to use a metaphor, not to diminish the work that you and I do, but to really help frame it and say, you know what? I could learn how to change my own oil. And like the first time it might go well, and the second time it might not go well, but I could do it myself.
Right.
But why? Like,
Right.
there are so many service providers that do it efficiently, like at scale, at reasonable cost, that I can get in, I can get out, I can get on my way. And I almost think of our role, right, because we're both in the space, as like, look, we are going to do this more efficiently, and we're going to help illuminate blind spots that you might not have thought of,
Right.
because we are the subject matter experts.
Right. And the other thing too, as a leader of an organization, you don't want to be the one doing everything.
Yeah.
You should be the one doing everything.
Like,
if you're the one doing the accounting, doing the payroll, doing the business development, doing the professional development, and doing HR, then no, that's not gonna set you up for success. You should be in the room with people who know more than you. That is what, and then bolster them up to then be their best selves. So if that requires you to go externally or outsource information, you shouldn't want to be housing. I know for me, as someone who's been, I guess, starting in their own business as well, I am someone who naturally will want to do things myself because I'm just like, I can just do it, it's fine.
yeah.
But then I'm also learning the importance of no, you shouldn't want to do everything. You should try to seek out support and understanding on how best to do certain tasks when it comes to having your own business.
Yeah, definitely. Same. Like, you and I could both do our accounting, do our books, do our social media posts. I'm like, yeah, I want to be involved, but there's somebody else who knows that way better than we do. And being able to let go, I think, is really important, and that's hard for folks.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's a learning experience.
But second point that you said a minute ago about how more on the side of all of these talented and amazingly skilled individuals are available on the marketplace, right? We have, staggering unemployment, at least in the United States, and other economic kind of implications globally. But I like to think about it as there's amazing talent that's on the market, and they can be incredibly choiceful about where to bring their career.
Mhm.
And I think there's a moment of evaluation, or at least I hope candidates would do a moment of evaluation of who's the organization I'm bringing my career to. Like, how did this company treat its employees,
Mhm.
former or furloughed, during the quarantine, during the pandemic? And is that what I want to be associated with?
Yes. Yeah. So um, I've noticed too, a lot of companies have really showed um, their stance in times of uncertainty. And to your point, I think this is also giving those who are currently employed or even who are looking to make a move a better sense of how what these companies' values are. You know, every organization will proudly put up on their website their values and their mission and their vision. But then when it really comes into practice and into play, then all of a sudden you have an opportunity now as the employee or someone who could be a potential employee for an organization to say, is this where I really want to go? Is this what I really want to do? Because I think a lot of companies who are also working for some of these organizations have been a little bit more vocal of lately in terms of how they're moving, the benefits that they're providing, the flexibility. I mean, companies like Twitter who are providing their employees with the option to work from home forever. I think a lot of tech companies in particular are kind of moving in that direction. Um, and it's also interesting too, before all of this, a lot of organizations were very hesitant about the whole working from home setup. It was always, well, we don't have, the systems or the technology, or I don't know if the work productivity
Mm-hmm.
will really match up. And now across the board, I think for the most part, I haven't seen a company who's been like, oh, this is plummeted our profits or
Yeah.
revenue has really gone. Like, I haven't seen a negative connotation as a result of it. Um, so I've said to some people, personal friends of mine too, like when it comes to the interview process, definitely ask the question about like, how have you been handling yourself during this pandemic? How have employees reacted to this shift? How has business been since you guys have been in this remote working capacity?
Mm-hmm.
And do you see yourself keeping this in process moving forward? Because now if an employee's like, well, I want to work from home twice a week, you can't
Why
say
not?
like,
You
you
can't
can't
say
do it.
no.
You can't really say no.
No, employers cannot say no because
You
we have
can't say no.
all shifted. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't really say no. So this is where the cards are kind of in the employee's deck and play them accordingly because companies, I think, are going to be moving very intentional and being very strategic on how they move because they don't want, one, obviously, the liability of an employee getting sick
Mm-hmm.
because they got back to work in a physical space too soon.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to lose employees. I mean, I'm sure a lot of companies have taken a hit in some way, shape, or form, but you don't want to keep going on that downward spiral because employees are leaving because you're not providing a comfort environment or you're not,
Right.
making it accommodating
Mm-hmm.
for my needs right now. So it's interesting. The rest of this year, and I even said this, I was even saying this to my family. I said Q4 is going to be a very busy time for a lot of businesses. Q4 is already always busy to begin with because it's the end of the year,
Yeah.
budgets,
Budgets.
all of that, the holidays, all of that.
Yeah.
Now we're dealing with trying to catch up with what we lost in the first half of the year. And so I'm very interested to see what the last like 4 or 5 months of the year will look like.
Yeah.
It's going to be
Yeah.
interesting.
I feel touching on something you said a minute ago, I feel like there needs to be a campaign, or if we haven't yet, of unemployed professionals going to Glassdoor and talking about their experience, because
Yeah.
I think that visibility is crucial.
Hmm.
And now is the time, right? Like, we are all at home, we are all like evaluating our professional priorities and how we want to move forward intentionally in this reopening world, whatever that looks like. And I think the visibility, I think you and I need to start that. We need to start trending on Glassdoor and be like, hey, this is already available, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
technology that's already available. Speak your mind.
Yeah. I mean, because I've, looked at certain companies on Glassdoor too, just to see what the visibility is or just the thoughts. And some of the companies, depending on the employees, are very candid in terms of their experience, which although kind of somewhat detrimental to the organization,
Mm-hmm.
is very informative for someone who is genuinely looking to make a move. I tell people all the time, make sure you go to Glassdoor or even sometimes Indeed to see what reviews are out there before even my sister, who is a year out of college, and she's been, kind of navigating, she's been working from home. So for her, this is a completely new concept, and understanding how to navigate and still be present, even though you're in sweats all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I've told her, I said, if you ever decide to make a move, you need to do when people say do your research, that means looking at the reviews, looking at the company website. Are things matching up with what they're saying versus what the employee is feeling?
Yeah.
And so all of that you got to take into consideration before you even look at clicking the apply button for a job.
Here's one of my other favorite. I totally agree with you. One of my
Yeah.
other favorites that I tell candidates, and that I have actually done as well for myself when I'm evaluating clients. I use this as part of my gap analysis. Is I go to their social media
Mm-hmm.
and I look at, what are they saying? What are they tweeting? What's their voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a new industry to me, I'm going to get curious. And I'm like, okay, if you're in this space, oh, and you were nominated for an award, oh, well, who else was nominated?
Yeah.
And what are they saying?
Mm-hmm.
What are your competitors saying on their
Yeah.
social media?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they have team photos and they bought a whole table to the award ceremony, and you have no pictures of the award ceremony, and you didn't buy a table.
Yeah.
You're not celebrating the recognition of all the hard work that your people went into
Mm-hmm.
earning that award.
Mm-hmm.
And you cut costs and said, all right, well, only two people, the CEO and the chief important person, whoever that is, right?
Yeah.
And that social media and what you put in there, like, why not celebrate? Like, if you did buy a table, like, celebrate and be like, hey, we brought our whole team.
Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn is a good tool too, just to see what their company page has, if they're active there.
Mm-hmm.
If they are active, what are they posting?
Mm-hmm.
Getting a look at the people of the organization. How diverse is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a certain look? Is there a certain feel? So yeah, if people really took time to like do just a little bit more on the research side, you
Yeah.
might get a little bit more information if you just take the time with it. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And listen to that voice, right? Like,
Yes.
I know as a job seeker, like, you just want a job. You're like, oh my God, I have bills, I have
Yeah.
pressures, I have economic things like kids and school and this, and like, the economic pressures are real, and you definitely want a job. But I have definitely been in that situation where I was placed in a job with a headhunter, and the very first day on the job, I called the headhunter and I was like, get me out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that was a mistake. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in those situations where you're placed at a job and you just look at the job description, you look at the title, you skim through qualifications, you're like, oh, okay, cool, no problem.
Yeah, I can do all
Um,
that. Check.
yeah, and it's just like whatever. And then you get there and you're like, oh, this is not what I signed up for at all. So yeah, like that's my big thing with anyone who was asking about just how to navigate in the job search space. I do do your research. Do your research as best as possible and really take time to look at a job description. Because
Yeah.
in the past, I've been guilty of that. You kind of like look at the title, you assume based off the title that this is in your head, you already think the job is going to be a certain way, even though the job description is right in front of you. You skim through a couple things, look at the qualifications, and they're like 3 to 5, and you're like, all right, cool. And
Mhm.
then you apply, you interview, you get the offer, you accept, you start working, you're like,
Mm.
so I thought it was going to be, and it's like, no, no. Yeah. Because one thing I've learned specifically is the title, you could have the same title at 3 different organizations and the work is completely different. So I know I've been guilty of assuming because I've had a similar title at one job and I see that title somewhere else, assuming that that work is going to be the same. And sometimes it's completely different. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm always like, make sure you take time with the job description and really process what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And especially on the candidate side, like get curious
Yeah.
and ask those questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's I like to be a little bit possessive when I coach candidate, like on the candidate side, like it's your career, it's your reputation, it's your brand. Like get curious about whether or not this is, you know, a company or a mission or a bottom line that you want to support.
Yeah.
Are these people that you can challenge? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I get interviews are nerve wracking, but there should be an appropriate level of like, I'm coming to the table as an equal mind.
Yeah.
So my equal mind has, I got questions. And if you don't have good answers for me, then that's an
Yeah.
answer. Like if you don't have answers,
Then that's the
that's a
answer. Yeah.
sign.
Yeah. It's fascinating, the
Yeah,
journey. Mm-hmm.
definitely. Um, Charlene, what can our listeners do to help support you? What's your next milestone? I like to say, put things into the universe, and they'll be answered. They'll be respond. It's amazing how many things come into my universe because I'm looking for them. So, what are you
Yeah,
looking for?
when you manifest a certain way. For me right now, it's been a lot of networking and having conversations with people. Um, Ideally, it would be great to connect with an organization who is, intentional about attracting diverse talent, who's intentional about making sure that they retain the diverse talent that they have, specifically for African Americans. It would be great to connect with colleges and universities in preparation for those who are graduating on what's to come. So for me, it's just being intentional about the connections that I make, um, and getting a better sense of the needs that people have. One thing I have been also intentional about is just paying attention to what my market is looking for. Like I said, with career coaches, I think a lot of people automatically assume it's like, oh, helping you with your resume, your
Yeah,
cover letter, and helping you find a job. But I didn't want to just be boxed in that sort of a realm. Um, like I said, understanding corporate America, understanding how to navigate that journey is work in itself. Um, and for me, I have a lot of friends who are all in similar boats professionally. And of course, we've all shared war stories of dealing with that micromanager or having to face certain microaggressions where you're just like, did he really just say that? Or did she really just say that? And then how to navigate the conversation. Do I say something to my manager? Do I go to that person directly? Do I just let it go and hope that it doesn't happen again? Or, when it comes to navigating in your career, I've been in this job for 3+ years. I know that I'm ready for the next thing, but every time I have a conversation with my manager, it's like, well, we're working on it. So it's how do I navigate? Do I stay put or do I start looking externally? And then if I'm looking externally, networking, how do I connect? And so like it's a whole circle, a whole journey, a whole process. So being able to be seen as a resource, um, for professionals of color, especially African American professionals, I think ultimately is how I want to position myself.
great, great.
Yeah.
And I think having I highly recommend coaches for everyone. I'm a coach for a lot of CEOs and first-time founders, right? And so having a career coach, I like to say is, or having a coach, and you're a career coach, is I say, let your family and friends love you. Go talk to a coach.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
they're going to say your resume looks great, or like, yeah, that job looks great, you should apply. But they love you and they want you to succeed.
Right.
And
Right.
coaches want you to succeed, but we're going to give some tough love.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need that level of accountability. You need someone who's outside looking in,
Yeah.
giving you a slightly different perspective. Because obviously you see your resume, you're going to think it's fine. Like you said, your mom or your dad or your boyfriend or your wife, husband, niece, whoever will see and be like, oh yeah, it seems fine. Like things are spelled correctly. And but then when you have someone who's looking at it from a different lens and they're like, well, maybe let's change it from a chronological format to a functional resume based on what you're trying to do. Or your cover letter, you're basically reiterating what's already in your resume. Let's change it so people can know a little bit more about you and what you want to do moving forward in this industry. So it's like just having a different perspective and providing people with that, I think also is helpful. But then it's like, I think a lot of people are still with this traditional mentality of what a career coach is and what they do. And so I've also had some conversations around that in terms of anybody. I actually wrote an article through LinkedIn about like how I feel, and I've been thinking about this a lot more about how I think everyone should have access to a career coach. And I think if companies provided a company sponsored career coach, just like how you would do for any sort of EAP resource, um, I think providing employees with access to someone like that, regardless of where you are in your career, I think would be a really good additional benefit and also bolster the company's profile in terms of what matters for them and their employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like how you say, like, do they value their employees, right? And is
Yeah.
there the sense of alignment? A minute ago, we were talking about like, oh, the values on the wall, they're nice and they're great, but like when shit hits the fan, oh no, but we didn't really like, oh, that's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you're investing in your people. There's some terrible meme out there of like, what if we invest in our people and we give them training and then they leave us? Well,
That's okay.
that's okay.
That's okay.
What if we don't train them and they stay? Isn't that
Right.
worse?
Or you don't train them and they just get worse. And then there's this negative, taste in their mouth and they still go ahead and bad, like it's okay. And that's the thing where it's just like, yeah, if you train them and they decide, I would rather be in a situation where I know I have a team. And if I know someone is looking to advance, if I provide them with the opportunity to advance and they go ahead and excel, that's going to leave them with a positive experience where they said, you know what, I was here. My manager knew I wanted to exceed. She provided me with the resource to do so. It's not like you're discarding them or throwing them away or saying like, oh, well, fine, go ahead. No, you're recognizing the needs of your team. Someone wants to excel or do something different or position themselves to go to that next level. And if you provide them with the resources to do so, they could in turn find their way back, or they could, transition within the company somewhere else, but you've given them that opportunity to do that and not try to like keep them so closed in.
And that recipient will say, oh my gosh, I received love and nourishment and professional development, and my manager, my direct supervisor, whoever it
Yeah.
is, cared about me as a human.
Mhm.
Humans do business with other humans, right? The whole theme. So meta, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then they'll go into the world and be like, oh my God, you know what? It's amazing to go work for Charlene. Do you know what she does for her team? I mean, I don't work for her anymore, but she's amazing, right? And just that natural goodness, if we put good into the world, that natural goodness will
come back to.
Oh. Yeah. And
agree.
it's amazing how many times I coach CEOs and they're like, oh God, we can't do that. They'll leave us. And I'm like, it's okay. Like,
It's okay.
that's what we want.
That's
like
exactly what you want. You don't want to keep them. Because I've been in that situation too, where it's like you find yourself stuck and then you don't want to. I think I was in a session, sat in on a session at the Mass Women's Conference where they were talking about women tend to have this sense of loyalty to a job where it's like after you get to a certain point, there's a point comes where it's like if you don't make a move, you're going to be stuck. And we get to this point and then we find ourselves stuck, and you've become so dependable for other people, where it's like they just come to you for everything, and you want to excel and go to the next thing, but you found yourself so comfortable in this one role, and because you don't want to disappoint your manager, because your manager doesn't want to have to find somebody else. And it's a whole, like, when you really take time to think about the science of just the psychological impact, the emotional impact of just like this whole workforce career journey, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
It is. It
It
is.
is.
You're the third person that's recommended the Mass Women's Conference. So it's now on my radar. Like, I got to go.
Oh, you never been?
I've never been.
Oh, yeah. I always tell people like you should go at least once. Um, it is overwhelming when you first go to see the actual sea of women that are there. I know I've gone probably the last 3 years, and within the last 5 years, I've gone at least 3 times. Um, and it's a full day. It is a full day. I know they've been working on some diversity related pieces to the conference, in terms of the roundtable setups that they've had for professional women of color. And I know they've had to change some things in terms of how that was set up. Um, but overall, to be in a room with that many women and it's just a sea of women all day, and the vendors that they have, you have an opportunity to interact on that level, the speakers. The only thing I will say, because the convention center is so big, trying to navigate from one session to the next, especially if they're like in complete opposite directions
Oh,
of each other, is the only thing where it's like, all right, I gotta leave at least like 10 minutes to spare so I
I'd
have
love
that
to
time.
chat, but I got to run.
Yeah, so then I can go run down the hall to go to the next session. But no, I think this year they might be doing it virtually. Tickets
Yeah.
normally go on sale, I think this week, for December.
Okay.
And they, in the past, they've normally sold out fairly quickly. But I think whenever they decide to do in person again, we should definitely try to make that priority to go.
Great. Awesome. I'll find I'll Google it. I'll find links. We'll put that in the
Yeah.
notes to the
Yeah.
episode so that people who are also curious can go and check that out. So I just want to be mindful of time, but Charlene, one of my favorite questions that I like to ask all of my guests is, what's your favorite art?
My favorite art.
Art. And there's a quote, I'll give you a minute to think. There's a quote that I absolutely love. It's from Darren Walker. And he says, without art, there is no empathy. And without empathy, there is no justice.
Very timely in the times that we're in right now.
Very
My
timely.
favorite art, does it have to be like actual artwork?
What your medium, your modality, whatever, music, dance, paintings, whatever.
So I'll say like, because she calls herself an artist. So Jill Scott is one of my favorite musicians of all time.
Nice.
And she just doesn't put out music like her. She has a very noticeable artistic expression in how she does her music and how she speaks. Um, when she performs live, she'll always insert various poems or things that she wrote in the midst of her songs. Um, and just her energy, like I absolutely adore her energy, because it's just very just even kill, very peaceful, very zen, and I've always gravitated to her music and just her as a person. She spoke at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, I think sometime last year.
Oh my God, that must have
And
been amazing.
one of my friends who works at Berkeley, she invited me to go because she knows I'm a huge Jill Scott fan. And so it was just crazy I was like a little kid in a candy store, because where we were sitting, she just happened to be coming from the side door closest to us. So like, and there was no formal introduction, like the talk was getting ready to begin. So like the moderators came out and then she came out and I turned this way and I was like, Completely froze the whole time. We were in line to meet her, but because of timing, we didn't get a chance to. But I've gone to shows by myself to see her perform. Like that is the one artist where I'm just like committed to the work that she does.
I love it. I love it. I
Yeah.
know of her. I don't know her work deeply.
Yeah.
And it's my favorite question to ask because art is so different. And
Yes.
everyone, you know, it resonates differently with each of us. And so I get to learn something new every time I ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Charlene, thank you so much for joining us. I hope our listeners learned something. I know I learned something. We'll put your ask into the universe and manifest that because I believe in it. And if there's anything else that we can do to help, just let me know.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the People Nova podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill. The team here at People Nova Human Capital would love to hear from you. We are always curious to hear from our listeners. So go ahead and send us an email, podcast@peoplenovahc.com, with your workplace questions or suggestions for who you'd like to see on our show. If you send us an audio memo, we may include your question on the show. Lastly, we are here to amplify. Our guests are amazing entrepreneurs, and we want you to forward our newsletter to someone in your network who needs to know the amazing things our guests are doing, so together we can make an impact. Thank you so much. Take care, and we will see you next time.